Hey there, and welcome to Broadband Deployment News. Did you know you don't need to wait for the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act in order to get billions of dollars? That states can use money today to build out broadband. Well, I've talked about USDA Connect, Reconnect, and today I'm going to be talking about ARPA. I'll be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Usey at Quorum here. So, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the broadband infrastructure dollars that are a part of that are something that we're going to have to wait on. As I mentioned in, I think, several recent broadcasts, it's probably going to be 2023 before those funds are actually dispersed to the states, because the federal government has until May or so to get the notice of funding opportunity out, and then the states have to submit a 5-year plan. They've got to submit their applications. They've got to decide who they're going to be giving this money to as far as who's going to be actually deploying the broadband. So there's a lot that's got to happen. So rather than wait 6 months, there's actually money right now that's available, and there have been some recent clarifications on how that money can be used. So I was going to talk about that today, and that's the ARPA program, if you will, or the American Recovery Plan Act. Okay, and that's something that was passed for the coronavirus pandemic that we had, and to help recover from that. But there's lots of money in there that can be used for broadband. So what exactly can we do with that? Let's talk about that. So this is the act, and if you were with me when I did my my preview of the IIJA, the Biden infrastructure bill, you can see it looks very similar in that up here in the corner you've got your little slider, and this can go all the way down to here. So there's lots in here. However, there's only 3 things. That broadband is only mentioned 3 times, and it's just mentioned right here. And this is, actually, that's the second reference, I think. Let's see. First reference is for consumers. So, things, money for mortgage assistance, principal reduction, those kinds of things, but also internet service, including broadband internet access, is defined. So we're talking about consumers there. But then there's 2 places where it talks about to make necessary investment in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure, and that is part of a tribal government section, and then also part of just for regular cities right here to respond there. So that's in there, very vague in just those 2 places. So a lot's been clarified, and I wanted to go through some of that. So first off, we had an interim rule back in, where was it? May 17, 2021. This interim final rule was brought out that clarified lots of stuff about this. This also, if you look at the slider over here, this is also a very long document. And a lot of this is not related to broadband. This is not like the Broadband Infrastructure Act that's got the BEAD section of it, broadband equity and deployment. So a lot of this is related to other things, which is why broadband is not mentioned that much in here, but it's in here. But rather than go through this, what I wanted to go through was an FAQ that the Treasury Department came out with on November 15th. So this was just last month, where they came out and answered some questions that people had based on the act and based on the final rules, the interim rule that was put out there. So I'm going to go through this. So I think this will be helpful if you are trying to figure out, how does this apply to you? Can you get funds, or can you request funds from other people that are getting funds? You could be a service provider, and that would be an option for you, or you could be a state or a city or a town. So first off, which governments are eligible? And you see here the following governments are eligible: states in the District of Columbia, territories, tribal governments, counties, metropolitan cities, and then what they call non-entitlement units, or smaller local governments. So to me, this makes it sound like you can't be a service provider and get the funds directly, right? So it's got to go through a government agency. But as a service provider, you could be somebody that could get the funds from one of these government agencies here. Which governments receive funds directly from the Treasury? So that's limited right there. So they'll distribute funds directly to each eligible state, territory, metropolitan city, county, or tribal government. Smaller local governments that are classified as non-entitlement units will receive funds through their applicable state government. So if you're a town and you need broadband, and you're not what they call a metropolitan city, or you're not a county, then you have to go up to the state government to get those funds to be able to provide broadband services. there's a lot in here that I'm going to scroll through. There's a couple of things here up front. In order to receive and use fiscal recovery funds, must a recipient maintain a declaration of emergency relating to COVID-19. So if you're a state or one of these entities that can get funds directly, a question came up is like, the pandemic, for all practical purposes, is over. It's still considered a pandemic, but I think a lot of folks are moving on now. So do we need to maintain this emergency response in order to get these funds and use these funds? And the answer is no. That the original bill or act and the interim final rule does not require recipients to maintain a local declaration of emergency relating to COVID-19, which is good to know. Again, I'm going to scroll through a bunch of this. I think there's something closer up front here that I wanted to talk about. Let's see if I go through. Maybe not. I think about, what do we got there? Did I just see something? No, I think it's about halfway through. Lots of text, as you can see, even in this FAQ. Lots of questions, which are good questions. How do I know if a specific use is eligible? Fiscal recovery funds may be used in one of the four eligible use categories specified in the American Rescue Plan Act and implemented in the interim final rule. So one of those four is to make necessary investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure, which we saw in the Act. But this is basically confirming that there, and this is talking about general use of the funds. So this is beyond, from what I see, the $10 billion or so that's available for what they call the capital projects fund. This is like the whole. This is basically the whole amount of money. I believe some of that can be used for broadband infrastructure. So now I'm going to scroll through quite a bit more, but we'll get to some really good questions here. Eligible uses for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. So here's where it goes into detail and what that means. First off, may construction on eligible water, sewer, broadband infrastructure projects continue past December 31, 2024, assuming funds have been obligated prior to that date. Because at December 31, 2024 is a date that's specified in the Act. And it says, yes, Treasury is interpreting the requirement that costs be incurred by December 31, 2024 to only require that recipients have obligated the funds by such a date. The period of performance will run until December 31, 2026. So as long as you're a state or one of these other entities that get these funds, you can, and as long as you've obligated those funds to a project, you can continue on in the construction and deployment of that up until December 31, 2026. What types of broadband projects are eligible? Now, one thing you'll notice about this is there's a lot more leeway in this act than there is in the IIJA, the Biden infrastructure bill that's encompassed in that. So the interim final rule requires eligible projects to reliably deliver minimum speeds of 100 meg download and 100 meg upload. In cases where it's impractical to do that, geography, topography, financial cost, those would be kind of considered high-cost areas. Projects must reliably deliver at least 100 meg by at least 20 meg upload speed and be scalable to a minimum of 100 download speed and 100 meg upload speed. So 100 by 20 is the minimum that's required in the IIJA, or the BEAD, Broadband Equity and Deployment Act. So in here, they're saying that they are really shooting for 100 by 100, but you can do 100 by 20 if it's a high cost kind of area. Projects also must be designed to serve unserved or underserved households and businesses, defined as those that are not currently served by a wireline connection that reliably delivers 25 meg by 3 meg download and upload. So a little difference here too. So in the BEAD, in the IIJA and the BEAD portion, broadband portion of that, unserved is 25 by 3 and underserved is 100 by 20. So here they're just saying everything is considered served or unserved if it's 25 by 3 or less, or I should say less than that. But there's a caveat in here. So actually, it's not saying that, and you'll see here, it's not saying, unlike the IIJA, you can actually use these funds for areas that have better broadband than that. So for broadband investments, may recipients use funds for related programs such as cybersecurity or digital literacy training? Yes. Recipients may use funds to provide assistance to households facing negative economic impacts due to COVID-19, including digital literacy training and other programs that promote access to the internet. Recipients may also use funds for modernization of cybersecurity, including hardware, software, and protection of critical infrastructure as part of provision of government services up to the amount of revenue lost due to the public health emergency. So just a FYI that's available. How do I know if a water, sewer, or broadband project is an eligible use of funds? Do I need pre-approval? A lot of leeway here. It says recipients do not need approval from Treasury to determine whether an investment in water, sewer, or broadband is eligible. Each recipient should review the interim final rule, which I just showed you, and I'll link to that. I'll link to all these documents that I'm showing today in the comments section when I'm done here. Should review the interim final rule along with the preamble to the rule in order to make its own assessment of whether its intended project meets the eligibility criteria in the IFR. So you can make your own assessment. However, recipients should be cognizant of other federal and state laws or regulations that may apply to construction projects independent of this bill, funding conditions that may require pre-approval. For broadband infrastructure investments, what does the requirement that infrastructure be designed to provide service to unserved or underserved households and businesses mean? So here's where, again, you have a little bit more leeway, and that you can actually use these funds to provide areas that are receiving more than 100 by 100 or even 100 by 20. Designing infrastructure investments to provide service to unserved or underserved households or businesses means prioritizing deployment of infrastructure that will bring service to households or businesses that are not currently served by a wireline connection that reliably delivers 25 by 3. To meet this requirement, states and localities should use the funds to deploy broadband infrastructure projects whose objective is to provide service to those areas. These unserved or underserved households or businesses do not need to be the only ones in the service area funded by the project. So you could have an area that's unserved or underserved, and you can provide broadband to that area. And if there are adjacent areas that are served, that doesn't mean that you can't use these funds to provide broadband there. So that could increase competition, I guess, from others. For broadband infrastructure to provide service to unserved or underserved households or businesses, must every house or business in the service area be unserved or underserved? And I think this is just another answer to that same question. No, it suffices that an objective of the project is to provide service to unserved or underserved households or businesses. Doing so may involve a holistic approach that provides service to a wider area in order, for example, to make the ongoing service of unserved or underserved households or businesses within the service area economical. So in other words, that could be the case, right? So in order to make it economical to serve unserved and underserved, it may be that serving these served or providing service to an area that you don't already provide that's served, so you've got a competitor in there, it would be economical for you, or more economical to provide to the unserved and underserved by providing it to that served area, obviously, because you can then, you've got a better chance of making a profit in that one area, and maybe it's an area that's you can have to go through to get to the unserved area. So yeah, there's a lot of leeway there. My recipients use payments from the funds for middle mile broadband projects. There's $1 billion in the IIJA for middle mile, and you can use these funds for middle mile as well. Yes, under the interim final rule, recipients may use payments for middle mile, but Treasury encourages recipients to focus on projects that will achieve last mile connections, whether by focusing on funding last mile projects or by ensuring that funded middle mile projects have potential or partnered last mile networks that could or would leverage the middle mile network. That's kind of similar to the IIJA. They want to make sure that you're not just doing a middle mile network for the sake of that. They want to make sure that it's going to help with last mile deployments. For broadband infrastructure investments, what does the requirement to reliably meet or exceed broadband speed thresholds mean? The use of reliably in the IFR provides recipients with significant discretion to assess whether the households and businesses in the area to be served by a project have access to wireline broadband service that can actually and consistently meet the specified threshold of at least 25 by 3. In other words, to consider the actual experience of current wireline broadband customers that subscribe to services at or above 25 by 3. Whether there is a provider serving the area that advertises or otherwise claims to offer speeds that meet the 25 by 3 upload speed and download speed thresholds is not dispositive. So, in other words, if you are looking at an area and there's a competitor there that says they're offering service above 25 by 3, but you happen to know that the customers there are not having a good experience, maybe it's a DSL provider, for some reason they're not able to provide a good experience, maybe they're oversubscribed, they don't have enough capacity in their network, it's a good network, but they don't have enough capacity and people are not getting those speeds, then you actually can go in and overbuild in that area. They're saying, you can consider the experience of the people that are supposedly getting above 25/3. It doesn't matter what another service provider says they're providing. It matters what customers are actually getting. So how do you know that? When making these assessments, recipients may choose to consider any available data, including but not limited to documentation of existing service performance, federal and/or state collected broadband data, such as the broadband maps that are currently available. I would say maybe the NTIA map. I don't know. None of them are really reliable, so I'm not sure how well that works. They're coming out with more reliable maps that would be better suited for that. User speed test results, and actually I take that back. So in the NTIA map, which I showed a demo of yesterday, if you go to our YouTube channel and look for the broadband deployment playlist, you'll see that yesterday I talked about the NTIA broadband map, and it actually does have a layer that shows speed tests, and it shows Microsoft speeds that they calculate when people are doing Microsoft Windows updates, those kinds of things. So that could be data that could be used in conjunction with determining this. And any other information, broadband data, state collected broadband data, user speed test results, interviews with residents and business owners. So you could do a survey of residents. Any other information that they deem relevant. In evaluating such data, recipients may take into account a variety of factors, including whether users actually receive service at or above the speed thresholds at all hours of the day. So maybe they're getting the speed at 2 a.m. but not at 8 p.m. Whether factors other than speed, such as latency or jitter or deterioration of the existing connections, make the user experience unreliable. So you can have a really fast service, but if you've got bad latency, then certain services like gaming, other things that require low latency, jitter would be really bad for a VoIP connection, those kinds of things. Deterioration of the existing connections make the user experience unreliable, and whether the existing service is being delivered by legacy technologies such as copper telephone lines, typically using DSL, or early versions of DOCSIS technology, cable system, like DOCSIS 2.0 or earlier. So DOCSIS 2.0 is very old, so most cable providers are going to have DOCSIS 3.0 at least, but there is still a lot of DSL lines out there, and they've been trying to upgrade those to fiber as quickly as possible so that people don't overbuild them, so they don't lose their customers to competitors that are already in the area. May recipients use funds for pre-project deployment for eligible broadband projects? Yes. So you can, if you need to do engineering services, you can create maps, feasibility studies, you can use it for that. Pre-project development uses and costs for broadband projects should be tied to an eligible broadband project or reasonably expected to lead to such a project, which obviously a feasibility study, engineering, those kinds of things would lead to that. For example, pre-project costs associated with planning and engineering for an eligible broadband infrastructure build-out is considered an eligible use of funds, as well as technical assistance and evaluations that would reasonably be expected to lead to commencement of an eligible project. And again, I see that as maybe feasibility studies, customer surveys, those kinds of things, and broadband mapping for the purposes of finding an eligible area for investment. All funds for this must be obligated within the statutory period between March 3rd, 2021 and December 31, 2024, and expended to cover such obligations by that December 31, 2026 date. Let's see here. May funds be used to build or upgrade broadband connections to schools or libraries? And they say, yeah. They say, yes, obviously residential, and they say business. And they say businesses and institutions that serve the public, such as schools, libraries, healthcare facilities, and public safety organizations. So they are saying that schools would be considered business under this. Let's see what else we had here, if anything. It looks like that may be it on this document. So hopefully it answered some questions if you have those. Now, you may have other questions about like, where do I apply and what else have we got here? So one thing I want to show here, I thought this was an interesting page here. This is on the National Leagues of Cities site, and they've got a good FAQ on this as well. So I'll post this as well as their FAQ. But this is showing the $65 billion here that's available to states, and it's showing what's already available, or what could be made available to these states. You can see here, I guess your darker colors are the ones that are getting the most money. You got New York, you got Chicago, Los Angeles, I guess California being a state, lots of cities that are getting money. You can see here you've got 4 billion, 1 billion, and you're getting down here into hundreds of millions of dollars. And you can click on a state. I'll click on Georgia and see what's allocated there. So again, you've got Atlanta at 170 million, Savannah at 55 million, going on down to your smaller cities. And these are your metropolitan cities. So these are the ones that can get funds directly. And I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom here to Edge Hill City, Georgia. So these are funds, as far as I can tell. These seem to me to be even smaller cities, but they're considered metropolitan cities that can get funds. And then if you're smaller than this, you can, I guess, ask your state for funds, because you would be eligible. You just have to get it through the state. So I thought that was an interesting site. And then finally, this is the Treasury site, and this is specifically where you would submit an application. Treasury Submission portal right there, submission requirements. There's lots of information there for this. And again, I mentioned who can submit directly to the Treasury. That would be your states, counties, and your metropolitan cities, those that are listed as metropolitan cities. So lots of money out there. If you're a service provider, that still means there's lots of money out there, because the states, in some cases, states are going to allocate it to they might allocate it to service providers, to others, these small towns that are not metropolitan cities. Cities may allocate it to service providers because they may not want to get in the business. They may want to they might want to partner with somebody that wants to do that, as long as they're willing to provide a certain level of service. They might do public-private partnerships where the city will build out a lot of the infrastructure and then let other service providers ride on top of that. It could be just one service provider that they partner with, or they might do an open access network where they build out the network and then they let other providers come in and sell services over that broadband pipe. So lots of opportunity here with ARPA. Again, I also did something on the USDA Reconnect program, so check out our YouTube channel and the playlist for broadband deployment news for that as well. Thanks for joining me. I hope this was helpful. If it was, please give me a thumbs up on YouTube on the video, and make sure that you're subscribed and click the little bell if you want to be notified whenever we are doing a live stream or posting a video, and you'll get a notification in your phone or device or your broadband browser. So hope you have a great weekend, and if I don't see you before Christmas, because we are taking a break, I am taking a break next week for the Christmas holidays. So I hope you have a wonderful holiday season, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.